Hi guys, we're talking about multiplying with tens and hundreds today. So if you have something like this, let's say 3 times 1, you know what that is, it's 3. What about 3 times 10? 30. What about 3 times 100? 300. Notice how you're really just looking at 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 10 is 3 tens. So I cover up the 0 and then it reappears over here. 3 times 100 is 3 hundreds. So if all the zeros you see on one side have to go on the other side too. So what if it's like 3 times 2? Well, 3 times 2 is 6, right? So what's 3 times 20? Again, we can just go 3 times 2, but we're talking about 3 times 2 tens, so that is 0. And the reason why you can do that is because 20, we've got 3 times 20 is the same as 2 times 10, right? It's 2 tens, which is 20. So if you write it like this, you can multiply in any order you want. That's what's cool about multiplication. You can break things down and you can move them around and multiply in any way you want. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then you just add a 0 at the end because it's 6 tens. But whether or not you break it down like that, it's the same thing. 3 times 20 is, well, you look at 3 times 2, just look at the numbers you see, and then you add the 0. So if we saw 3 times 200, guess what we're going to get? Well, what's 3 times 2? It's 6. And then we're not talking about just ones, right? We're talking about hundreds, so 600. And if you break that down, it's really 2 times 100, right? It's 2 hundreds. So I can just do any order I want. I can go 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 times 100 is 600. So you can kind of move it around. But the real crux of what I'm saying is if you see a problem like 53 times 10, you can just look at, well, what's 53 times 1? But we're talking about tens. We need to put that 0 over here. It's like that. 530. So you'll see some problems like that today, where it might be like, what's 30 times 600? And that looks like a big problem, but because I know I can kind of break things down, I can think of it as 3 times 10 times 6 times 100. So I just look at first, what's 3 times 6? 18. And then how many zeros do I have? Well, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to write them on this side. 1, 2, 3. And I put my comma in the right spot. 1, 2, 3, comma. 18,000. So the zeros just kind of go over here, which makes sense because, like I said, it's 3 times 10 and 6 times 100. 3 times 10 is 30 times 6 times 100. And if I think of it like that, I can just go out of order. Oh yeah, 3 times 6 is 18. And then 10 times 100 is 1,000. You're just kind of separating and moving it around. So you're going to be doing that a lot in these assignments today. So they'll set you up. Like if you look at number 4 here, it looks kind of tricky, but really you're just looking at what's 87 times 6. You've got to figure that out the old-fashioned way. And then what's 87 times 60 and 870 times 60. And you'll notice you're just going to add a 0 for each answer because 87 times 6 will be that, but 87 times 60, well, we've got to add a 0. And 870 times 60, we've got to add 2 zeros. And what's kind of interesting with these, so if you see a problem like this, I'll do a problem like, let's say 35 times 4. Okay, well, 4 times 5 is 20. Oh, give you your spots. 4 times 5 is 20. Do I squeeze it in there? Nope. 0 goes here, 2 goes up here because it's like 2 tens. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. But what about 300 and, let's say 35 times 40? Well, we already know we're just going to add another 0 to that, right? So let's get our spots right. So when you do problems like this, and first you always multiply the ones first, right? But there are no ones. So it's just going to be, so you're like, oh, there are no ones. So I don't even have to worry about it. So if I see a 0 there in the 1 spot, it just goes right down there in the 1 spot. And I move over to the 10 spot. And now I can start doing these. What's 4 times 5? We've got 4 10s times 5 1s. That's 20. But now they're going to go into this spot because I'm starting the 10, so it goes straight down. Which makes sense because 10 times 10 times 1s is 10s. So you've got 20. And now I go to the next one. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 2 is 14. And if you have your spots all lined up right, the one goes right down. They should all go in the right spot. Which makes sense because if 35 times 4 equals 140, which we just figured out, check this out. 35 times 40, well, it's going to be the same thing as 140, but just add another 0, right? I'd add that 0, which is what we got. Or if I saw a problem like 350 times 40, that sounds really hard, but if we know that 35 times 4 is 140, then I just add the 2 zeros. And you get that number, 14,000. So you're just kind of looking at what can you solve, and then you just add the extra zeros at the end. So they're kind of challenging to do that with some of these. So like, oh yeah, they're like, figure out what 70 times 4 is. So you do, and then like, well, what about 70 times 40? And you know it's going to be the same answer, but there's going to be another 0 in there because there's a whole new place value involved. Or what's 87 times 5? Well, what's 87 times 50? Well, there's going to be another 0 at the end because it's going to be 10 times that number. So those are some things you'll be working with today, are counting the zeros. So if you see a big problem like, let's say 300 times 500, dang, that's a big number to solve. But if you know, well, 3 times 5 is 15, and I can just count the zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, and add them over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then put the comma in the right place. You count back 3, 1, 2, 3, comma, then you just solved it. 150,000. And that's because you're able to move things around a little bit. So count the zeros, throw them on the other side, because we're not talking about 300 times 5. We're talking about 300 times 500. So all these zeros need to go on this side too. So today you'll be doing numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5. You can do it.